asked for it, so we're doing it today. A under-the-radar defensive free agent targets for your Houston Texans. We had previously made a video about some offensive free agent targets, some under-the-radar guys, and enough of y'all liked that video, so I went ahead and decided, hey, we're going to make a defensive video now. Swarm Patrol out there making things happen. If you didn't see the offensive video, all good. I'm going to put it in the comment section of this video. So after this one plays, if you want to go see some offensive free agents that the Texans could look at, be my guest and go check that out here on the channel. And as a reminder, if you didn't see this video, it's probably because you're not subscribed. News, rumors, analysis, everything going on around the NFL in terms of trades, free agency, the draft, everything around your Houston Texans. This is your one-stop shop. And I want to hear from y'all because this is a Texans channel made by the fans for the fans. So if you want to be part of the #1 Texans community here on YouTube, go ahead and hit that sub button. We're trying to get to 50,000 subs by the NFL draft. And you want more videos around your Houston Texans, make sure to hit that subscribe button today. All right, let's get right into the free agent targets for your Houston Texans. First up, Da'Shawn Hand, defensive tackle for the LA Chargers this past season. 29 tackles, 1.5 sacks, 5 tackles for loss. And funny enough, the Chargers, they just went ahead and extended Tyler Tart, a guy that was actually a member of the Houston Texans before going to the Chargers. He had himself quite the season for LA, and you know, that means if they're going to extend one guy, they're probably not going to go ahead and bring back Da'Shawn Hand. 13 games played this season, 29 tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks. He's dealt with, the injury history. Back in 2022, only played 1 game due to a torn quad muscle, but, still on the right side of 30, and the Texans, they definitely need some more defensive tackle depth. So why not start off with a guy, maybe like a guy, like Da'Shawn Hand, or like an Levi Onwuzurike from the Detroit Lions. Don't laugh. I did a really good job at saying his name. I did a really good job. 28 tackles, 1.5 sacks this past year for Detroit. And kind of the same thing I was just mentioning around Da'Shawn Hand is that Levi, he comes with a little bit of injury history. This past year, not too bad, right? Plays 16 games for, or actually this past year, he did not play for the Lions. In 2024, he played 16 games, 28 tackles, 1 tackle for loss, 2 sacks, 13 QB hits, and 1 forced fumble. And this isn't the only time he's dealt with some injury history during his time in the NFL, right? So a little bit of a risk reward here. He was a former second-round pick. He does have, a good talent. He has the ability, but it's just, can he stay on the field? The best ability is availability. And as I mentioned, the Texans going into this offseason, defensive tackle is going to be a big point of emphasis. And I think on both sides of the ball, offense and defense, that, trench mindset, the building in the trenches, that needs to start this offseason because, you have the good defensive ends. You need more defensive tackle help, and that's why I'm looking at guys like a Da'Shawn Hand, like a Levi Onwuzurike. If I could just, stop tripping over my words. I think both those guys could definitely add to the defensive tackle depth. Obviously, with maybe re-signing a couple guys you already have, like a Sheldon Rankins, Tim Settle, Naquan Jones, that would definitely help this Texans defensive line. Let's look at some other options along the defensive line. Let's go to edge rusher Samson Ebukam from the Indianapolis Colts, and it's always a plus when you can steal from a division rival like Indianapolis, and bringing in a guy like Samson Ebukam would definitely help that out a ton with, building some depth as, the edge rushers behind a Danielle Hunter, behind a Will Anderson Jr. I think both those guys are fantastic. I think it's the best pass rush duo in the NFL. But we've seen before the Texans, they like to keep them fresh, so they like to rotate some guys in. We saw Derek Barnett get a lot of run here with the Houston Texans over the past couple seasons. He is entering free agency, so why not go out and maybe get a guy like a Samson Ebukam? This past season for Indianapolis was okay. 14 games played, 33 tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks. But if you go back prior to his injury in 2023, 9.5 sacks, 10 tackles for loss, 17 QB hits. He was an absolute demon coming off the edge for Indianapolis and hitting free agency, coming off a so-so year. I think you can get him at a good price tag. And as a rotational guy, if you're telling me you have to deal with Will Anderson Jr. or Danielle Hunter, and they get off the field, and then you're bringing in a guy like Samson Ebukam. That is a huge plus for this Texans defense and building off a bigger strength that you have in the edge rushing spot if you bring in a guy like Ebukam. But speaking of the Indianapolis Colts, I have a question for you. Do you think the Colts will be better or worse than they were in 2026? Remember, halfway through the year, they were the number 1 seed in the AFC. Now, obviously, after Daniel Jones' injury, everything kind of went downhill, a kind of snowball effect in Indianapolis. What do you think, though? Do you think they'll be better or worse? I'll lean towards them being worse. I actually think, I've said this the past couple of years, it hasn't come to fruition, but I think the Titans will be a lot better than the Colts this year. I think the Titans probably might be a little bit better than the Jags. I don't know. I think Brian Dable, Robert Saleh going to Tennessee, that's a good coaching duo there. I really like Cam Ward coming out of the University of Miami. I think that they could jump the Indianapolis Colts as the third, maybe even jump the Jags as the second best team in the AFC South. And yes, I'm still putting the Texans as the best team in the AFC South. Jags fans will be like, oh, well, we won the AFC South this year. We won the division. You didn't win a playoff game, so it doesn't really matter, Jacksonville. Let's go to another defensive lineman that the Texans could look at. Yetur Gross-Matos, a former second-round pick for the Carolina Panthers, and has had an up-and-down career this past year. Played for the San Francisco 49ers, 8 tackles, and was okay for them. Was just so-so. But kind of like I said before with Samson Ebukam, if you're looking at a guy just to be a rotational guy, I think he could be a decent, cheap option for the Texans to add some more edge rush help as just somebody who comes in whenever, Will Anderson Jr., Danielle Hunter needs a breather. I think he could be a decent option for this Texans team at a pretty cheap price tag. Like I said, a former second-round pick. I have some more under-the-radar free agent options for your Houston Texans, and I think a lot of y'all are going to want to stick around for the safety options because that might be the biggest need besides defensive tackle on this Texans defense going into the 2026 NFL season. But speaking of needs, you need to get started with our friends over at Prize Picks. The big game is almost here, and there's no better way to cash in during America's biggest sporting event than Prize Picks, where it feels good to be right. And since the big game is right around the corner, that also means it's your last chance to get in on the football action before next season. So close the season out right with Prize Picks by getting $50 instantly in lineups when you play your first $5. It's super simple. Just pick more or less on at least 2 player stats. If you get your picks right, you can cash in big time, and you can now get in on the action in all 50 states. Prize Picks is available in all 50 states, so there's no excuse to not get started with them today. For the big game, they have a max discount. Drake May, he only has to throw 1 passing yard. I don't think he's going to do that well. I actually think Seattle's defense is going to put him in clamps, but he will get 1 passing yard. Believe that. This next one, this is probably the most fun one in my lineup. I'm going Kenneth Walker, 3.5 yards on his first rush. Very, very, this one's a fun one. This one's a fun one. It'll have you on the edge of your seat. I'm also going Ramondre Stevenson to get a touchdown, and then I'm going Sam Darnold to throw more than 1.5 passing touchdowns. You can use my lineup or make your own. Just do it with our friends over at Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. All right, let's go to the linebackers now. Micah McFadden, who this year for the Giants really didn't play a ton. He got injured at the early portion of the season, and he could have returned, but the Giants are cheeks. Really, there was no reason for him to come back. He might end up re-signing with the G-Men, but in 2024 had himself a pretty decent year. 107 tackles, 3 sacks, 8 tackles for loss, 1 forced fumble, and 1 fumble recovery for New York. I think he could be a decent option, and the Texans, it's not a need per se at the linebacker spot. They mostly run a 4-2-5, so they have their 2 starters already. Azeez Al-Shire, Henry Toto going into next year. They use Jalen Petrie as that pseudo kind of third linebacker, nickel corner role, but you need more depth at that position. You need to add some more linebackers because EJ Speed, he's a free agent. Christian Harris is a free agent, along with other guys in that linebacking core. Micah McFadden could be a decent option to insert and maybe be somebody who can take over that EJ Speed role as that third linebacker in the room. Another guy, Christian Rozeboom. I really like this kid. He was good with the LA Rams, and then he goes over to the Carolina Panthers and has himself a pretty decent year there as well. 122 tackles, 2 sacks, 7 tackles for loss, 1 forced fumble on the year for Carolina. He's another decent guy, and maybe other teams look at him as a starting option, but I think as a third linebacker, somebody who can sub in, kind of help out with this defense, kind of give Azeez Al-Shire, Henry To'oTo'o a breather from time to time, he could be another good option. Same with Leo Chenal from the Kansas City Chiefs. And, speaking of stealing guys from teams in your division, also stealing guys from in your conference, that could help as well. We know the Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes, are going to be on a revenge tour next year, so why not steal one of those guys from that Steve Spagnuolo defense in Leo Chenal? And this year was good, right? In 2025, 14 games played, 58 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, 5 quarterback hits, 2 pass breakups, and 1 interception on the season. But I really think, you go back and look at him throughout the past couple seasons, he's been a big part of that Chiefs defense, and they've had a really good linebacking core with him, Nick Bolton, among others. I think he could be a good addition to this Texans linebacking room because, as I mentioned, there's a lot of free agents coming in this offseason for the Houston Texans. EJ Speed, as I mentioned, Christian Harris, Damone Clark. So you don't necessarily need another starter because I believe you're set with Azeez Al-Shire and Henry To'oTo'o, but just somebody that you could possibly come in and really, help relieve some of those duties from those 2 starters that you have in the linebacking room. I think Leo Chenal would be a decent name for this Texans defense. Now, I've given you a bunch of names so far. Let me know. Before I get into the secondary, guys, name a free agent you want the Texans to sign. You can wait until I name everybody else in the video, but go down in the comment section and let me know. Who's a free agent that you want the Texans to sign? Maybe on the defensive side of the football. Let me know down below in the comment section. Let's keep on going with the secondary now. Let's go to the cornerback position and somebody who played for, you see his jersey, the Seahawks, and he played for the Rams this past season, Derion Kendrick. And I think, kind of the same thing I just said about the cornerback spot. You're set at your starters. You have Kamari Lassiter. You have Derek Stingley. You just need a little bit more depth. You have Jalen Smith, who was a rookie this past year, who should be good to go for the start of the 2026 season. But a big problem that the Texans have had over the past couple of seasons is that secondary depth. I feel like they keep on having to sign guys off the street, sign guys off practice squads, and elevate guys. And nothing against Miles Bryant, but they keep on having to go back to this crutch of a guy like a Miles Bryant to come in and help throughout the secondary. Why not just upgrade at those positions and get some more talented guys on the roster to start your 53-man roster? I think Derion Kendrick could be a guy to help alleviate some of that tension on the back end of your roster and help add some more depth at the cornerback spot. Same with a guy like Asante Samuel Jr. was not signed until towards the end of the season, ended up playing the back half of the year with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Did not too bad, right? 10 tackles, 1 interception, 1 pass breakup, at a pretty good PFF coverage grade for Pittsburgh towards the back half of the year. Was dealing with a scary injury, a neck back injury, but, seemed to be pretty good for the Steelers after coming back from that injury. So I wouldn't be opposed to signing him to a 1 or 2 year deal as a backup. Avonte Maddox is another guy who could come in, and he's a very versatile guy. I know it says cornerback up there, but he plays multiple positions on the back end. He can play corner. Kind of like think of him as like a Miles Bryant replacement. Can play corner, can play safety, can play nickel. He plays all across the board in your secondary. And as I look right now, Jalen Reed could be an option there at strong safety for you next to Kalen Bullock. But, we didn't see that much from the rookie. He was a 6th-round pick, and he was injured for a better portion of this season. And I think you need to add some guys to possibly maybe push him at that strong safety spot. And that's where I'm going with these next guys. Reed Blankenship is a free agent from the Philadelphia Eagles. And I think, he's a really, underrated safety in this league for one reason or another. But, he always finds himself around the ball. I think he has really good instincts on the back end. And this season, 83 tackles, 1 interception, 4 pass breakups for Philadelphia in that defense under Vic Fangio. Played 16 games this year, and I think he would be another, decent addition to this Texans team, especially in the safety room, where you can maybe look to push a guy like a Jalen Reed and maybe see, what he's got, or maybe if Reed's more of a backup and Reed Blankenship becomes your starter. Speaking of, we talked about Samson Ebukam earlier. Maybe steal a guy like a Nick Cross. I think he could be a decent option to maybe insert as your other starting safety next to Kalen Bullock, because I think that position, Jalen Reed, he's going to have to fight for that spot this offseason in OTAs and training camp. They're not just going to let him roll in as the starter week 1. They're going to give him some competition, whether that's in free agency or whether that's in the draft. So Nick Cross could be another option for the Houston Texans. 120 tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, 5 pass breakups to 1 interception this past season for Indianapolis. And if you look at his coverage stats, not too shabby. When targeted, a completion percentage of 72.5. He allowed 567 yards. As I mentioned, that 5 pass breakups, 1 interception. A QB rating when targeted of 110 could be a decent option across from Kalen Bullock. Let's keep on going with some more safety options. Alohi Gilman was actually traded halfway through the season this year. He was on the Chargers, then got traded to the Baltimore Ravens in return for Odafe Owe, and I think both teams kind of benefited from that, even though the Ravens, they desperately needed some pass rush towards the end of the year, especially in that Week 18 game up against the Pittsburgh Steelers, which they really didn't get that from the rest of their guys on their defensive line. But Alohi Gilman did make some plays for the Baltimore Ravens this past year. 65% completion percentage when targeted, 396 yards, had those 3 pass breakups to no interceptions. And kind of a hard thing, I can't imagine, halfway through the year, switching teams, switching play styles, switching playbooks, everything, and, continuing on, how well he had played for the Chargers. But he did okay for the Ravens this year. The past 3 seasons, though, for the Chargers, he has been a secret weapon for LA, right? 4 pass breakups to 1 interception in 2024 and only 11 games played. 14 games played the year prior, had 10 pass breakups, 2 interceptions. He has been a really solid player for multiple seasons, and not somebody I don't think the Texans would have to break the bank for. I think he could be an option that you bring in, and not, your immediate starter. He'd have to fight it out with Jalen Reed. I think he could be a decent option. And the last guy I'm going to bring up is PJ Locke, and it's kind of that similar option where I don't think he's going to cost you a ton. Played for the Denver Broncos this past year on more of a secondary, role on that roster. Didn't get a ton of starts until a couple other guys got injured in that Denver secondary, but, not a, full-on starter. Wouldn't have to pay him a ton of money coming out of free agency, but a good option if you want to push Jalen Reed during training camp, during, OTAs this offseason. All right, I give you a ton of names. Let me know down in the comment section if you want to sign any of those guys for free agency here for the Houston Texans. If you want to give me a follow on Twitter, you can do so at Jeremy Chugs. My DMs are always open. And if you made it to the end of today's video, make sure to hit that subscribe button for free Texans content all year long.